He just wanted to walk his dog through the quiet streets of Detroit. But when a vicious biker kicked Spike like trash, he had no idea who owned it. Jason Statham saw it all. And in that moment, something inside him woke up. What started as a simple stroll would turn into a hunt for justice that no one would be able to stop. And when you find out who was behind it all, you'll understand why you should never mess with a man like Jason's dog. The wind that morning carried with it the scent of rust, oil, and smoke. The industrial streets of East Detroit seemed frozen in time, with their abandoned warehouses and faded graffiti, scars of a busier past. Among the worn buildings and cracked sidewalks, a solitary man emerged from the shadows. Broad shoulders, firm posture, eyes hard as concrete. It was Jason Statham. By his side walked a gray-coated pit bull, alert eyes and defined muscles as if each fiber of his body had been shaped by battles no one had ever seen. The dog answered to Spike. To many, just another dog. To Jason, the last link to something he had lost and would never get back. The sound of metal footsteps echoed in the dry leaves. Jason kept his hand in his jacket pocket while Spike walked with the elegance of a veteran soldier. It wasn't a simple walk. It was part of a silent ritual they had repeated for years, a way to keep ghosts at bay. Across the street, a group of bikers gathered in front of an old bar with rusty doors and flickering lights. The place was called Steel Fang, and it exuded a toxic energy that clung to the air. The bikes parked out front were black, heavy, with tall handlebars like demon horns. The men riding them bore symbols of power and intimidation on their backs, but also the empty stare of those who had already lost their souls. Jason observed for a moment, then continued forward with Spike. The dog sniffed the ground, alert. His ears moved like antennas, picking up every vibration. A slight tremor ran down his spine, but he kept going. Jason noticed. He didn't need words to understand. Something was wrong. Then it happened. The roar of a motorcycle cut through the air like a blade. One of the bikers got off with heavy steps. He looked at Jason, then at Spike, and then, with a quick and cruel motion, raised his leg and delivered a harsh kick to the dog's ribs. The impact echoed down the sidewalk. Spike fell to the side, gasping. The world froze for a fraction of a second. The biker's laugh shattered the silence. A crude, dirty laugh, full of sick satisfaction. He didn't know. He had no idea who that man standing a few steps away was. Jason didn't move immediately. Eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. The rage didn't come like an explosion. It rose like thick smoke, slow, silent, and absolutely inevitable. The biker spat on the ground, turned his back, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Jason knelt beside Spike, touched him gently. The dog was conscious, but something was strange in his eyes. A slight tremble in his paws, breathing too fast for the moment. Jason knew him too well to ignore it. In that moment, a decision was made within him. It wasn't rational, it was instinctive. A code only men with internal scars understand. No one hurts what he protects. No one. Spike got up with difficulty. Jason ran a firm hand over his head. The dog's eyes said more than any phrase. Don't leave me now. They continued, silent. But now it was no longer a morning walk. It was the beginning of something even Jason didn't yet know how far it would go. As they turned down a side street, Jason noticed something new in the dog's behavior. Slower steps, irregular breathing, excessive drooling. It wasn't just pain from the kick. There was something darker working inside. A toxin. A poison. Jason stopped, looked at Spike. The world around seemed to fade. City noises became distant, irrelevant. Only one thought pulsed in his mind. This was premeditated. He knew this type of attack, had seen poisoned dogs in illegal fights, knew how to spot the signs, and Spike showed them all, alarmingly so. The kick was just the smokescreen. The real intent was hidden. And now, time was against them. Jason picked up the dog in his arms, feeling the weight of his friend like he was carrying destiny itself. He ran through the streets as if every step was a punch against the clock. Every corner, an obstacle. Every breath, a countdown. Passers-by turned to look at the man, a striking figure determined, carrying an animal in distress. But no one dared stop him, no one dared ask. It was as if they knew a mission was underway, something greater than them. The nearest clinic was 6 blocks away, and Jason crossed them like a silent hurricane. When he finally burst through the glass door of the veterinary office, his presence hit like an avalanche. The receptionist widened her eyes. Jason's look didn't ask for help. It demanded it. The dog was rushed in. A doctor examined him, muttering technical terms, but Jason didn't hear. His focus was fixed on the rise and fall of Spike's chest. Up and down, but growing weaker. Death seemed to whisper too close. Then he felt it. That old pain. The same one that had followed him since the day he lost his daughter. The same knot in the throat. The same void. But not now. Not again. Jason stepped out of the exam room, leaned against the wall. Cold sweat ran down his neck. He knew what needed to be done. That man, the biker who kicked Spike, he knew what he was doing. This wasn't a random provocation. It was a calculated attack. And if it was intentional, it had a reason, a story, a past. And Jason knew that kind of man. There, in the sterile silence of the clinic, an image began to form. Fragments of faces, old memories, unpaid debts. Maybe this wasn't just about the dog. Maybe it was about him. He took a deep breath. The air was heavy, but his mind was clear. Whatever was coming, he would face it. And in the background, even unconscious, Spike let out a soft whimper, as if saying, "Don't leave me." Jason answered silently, "I won't." And as Jason walked out of the clinic with clenched fists, he didn't yet know, but what he was about to discover in that bar was something that had haunted him for over a decade. Detroit was a city that kept secrets in the corners of its streets and in the eyes of those who walked in a hurry. Those who had lived there long enough learned to recognize what was just urban noise and what was a real threat disguised as routine. Jason knew that, and that day, he felt the eyes of the city following him with silent vigilance. Spike remained hospitalized, connected to IV fluids monitored closely. The vet suspected intentional poisoning, but awaited lab tests to confirm. Jason didn't need to wait for the reports. He recognized the pattern. It was methodical, subtle, and lethal. It was the signature of someone who had done it before. Back on the streets, Jason walked without an apparent destination, but his eyes scanned the surroundings with surgical precision. He knew those blocks as if they were an extension of his own body. He knew where the glances turned away, where the smiles were fake, where fear lived behind windows with closed curtains. He passed by a corner grocery store where the owner pretended to organize cans. A boy on a bicycle slowed when he saw him and looked away. A woman pushing a stroller quickened her pace. It wasn't Jason who caused that. It was the silence around him. The kind of silence that reveals that everyone knows something, but no one speaks. In that neighborhood, the name Steel Fang wasn't just the name of a bar. It was a warning. Jason stopped in front of the building. The bar looked dirtier in daylight, like a body without makeup. Dark windows, stained walls, a metal door with marks of old blows. It was more than a biker hangout. It was the base of operations for a gang that spread like rust. They controlled the area through fear and silence. Small extortions, veiled threats, paralyzing looks. The kind of oppression that never made the news but slowly destroyed lives. Jason had seen it before, in other places with other faces, but the pattern was always the same. Cowardice disguised as power. He approached without hurry, noticed that the same motorcycle from the aggressor was there, arrogantly parked, taking up 2 spaces. The helmet hanging from the handlebar was decorated with crude symbols, skulls, and chains, the cliché of a bully who thought himself untouchable. Jason didn't go in, not yet. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't like them. He kept walking. That afternoon, he spoke to old acquaintances, shop owners, mechanics, street vendors. Broken conversations, nervous glances, vague answers. But among the meaningless phrases, something revealed itself. No one liked what the gang was doing, but everyone was too afraid to speak out. In a forgotten barbershop at the end of the avenue, Jason found someone willing to talk. A man with tired eyes who reminded Jason of himself in another time. He told stories. Stories of people who lost their businesses for refusing to pay protection fees. Stories of residents who disappeared after trying to report. And one story in particular caught Jason's attention. A few months ago, another dog was found dead behind the diner, poisoned. No one saw anything. No one said anything. But now everything made sense. That gang wasn't just violent. They were symbolic. They attacked what people loved most. They did it to show dominance, not to remind everyone that no one was above them. Jason clenched his fists. A new layer of silent hatred grew inside him. It wasn't just about Spike now. It was about all those who stayed quiet out of fear. It was about the boy on the bike, the woman with the stroller, the old barber with broken eyes. And there was more. That same afternoon, as he passed an abandoned bus stop, Jason realized he was being followed. A quick reflection in the broken window of a store revealed the silhouette. A man, black jacket, messy beard, synchronized steps. The type of follower who didn't want to be discreet. It was a message. Jason entered a convenience store, grabbed a bottle of water, paid in silence, and exited through the back. In seconds, he was behind the pursuer. The man had no time to react. Jason pressed him against the wall firmly, eye to eye. The guy trembled, and that's when Jason saw something he didn't expect. Genuine fear. The man mumbled that he didn't want trouble, said he had only been sent to observe, one of the new members, trying to prove loyalty. Jason understood. The gang was testing him. He let the man go. But now he knew he was being watched, and that only made him more certain. They knew who he was. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and rust-colored when Jason returned to the clinic. The vet came to meet him. Her expression was serious. Spike was stable, but the tests confirmed industrial poison in calculated doses. The kind used to eliminate without leaving traces. A cowardly, premeditated attack, impersonal, but deeply personal for Jason. He approached the room where the dog rested. Spike was lying down but opened his eyes when he sensed his owner's presence. Still weak, but alert. The tail moved slightly, a small gesture, but one that carried the weight of an unbreakable friendship. Jason knelt beside him, rested his forehead on the animal's, and there, in the silence between man and dog, was born the promise that this would not end like this. What they had done to Spike was just the surface. What hid behind that bar, those bikes and those fake laughs, ran deeper. And Jason would dive all the way to the bottom. Because he didn't fight for revenge. He fought for justice. And the city had begun to watch. But Jason was never good at accepting silence. And now what was at risk wasn't just his dog. It was the whole neighborhood. And soon, the past he had buried would return to haunt him, with a face he had never forgotten. Night had fallen over Detroit like a heavy cloak, suffocating the city in silence. The streets that by day looked merely dirty now felt dangerous. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every corner, a warning. And for Jason Statham, there was no more room for assumptions. Spike was still at the clinic. The vet kept him under constant observation, monitoring vital signs with the precision of someone who knew any mistake could be fatal. The poison had been identified, a compound used in illegal urban rodent traps mixed with anesthetic substances. Lethal, silent, almost undetectable. It was the signature of someone who had done it before. Jason watched the IV drip slowly through the tube connected to Spike's paw. The image was unbearable. That was not just a dog. It was the last link to something he had lost long ago. Something the criminals behind this would never understand. The silent connection between two beings who had survived the worst and were now fighting together again. He knew what had to be done, and he needed answers. Jason left the clinic in silence. The street was cold, but his mind was burning. He walked to an alley hidden between two abandoned warehouses. There, amid peeling walls and the smell of mold, he waited for someone. An old contact. Someone who didn't appear in official records, but who knew the city's underworld better than anyone. The man showed up a few minutes later, wrapped in shadows. Graying hair, wary eyes, an old informant. They had never been friends, but there was respect between them. Jason handed him an envelope. Clean money. In exchange, he received information. Photos, names, locations. Among the papers, one image made his blood run cold. The biker who had kicked Spike wasn't just a random thug. He was part of a group called the Black Dagger Riders, a biker gang involved in trafficking, illegal betting, and animal fights. And worse, the current leader of the group was Royce Maddox, a name Jason knew well. Royce wasn't just another criminal. He was a ghost from the past. A man who had crossed paths with Jason back when he still worked in covert operations in Europe. Back then, Royce was just a second in command. Violent, impulsive, but ambitious. Jason saw him rise and saw him betray. He was the one who sold out an entire mission for money, costing the lives of 3 agents. Among them, someone very close to Jason. And now, he was here. Again. Involved in the pain Jason felt once more. That wasn't a coincidence. Jason knew he would have to face him, but first, he needed to understand what Royce wanted, and why he had chosen to attack him that way. He decided to return to Steel Fang, the bar that served as the gang's front, but this time he would go in. The metal door gave way with a muffled creak. Inside, the smell of cigarettes, alcohol, and sweat was suffocating. The lights were dim, and the stairs turned to him like invisible knives. No one spoke, but everyone saw. Jason walked among the tables with the calm of someone who fears nothing, a predator among hyenas. At the back of the bar, a familiar laugh echoed, deep, full of mockery. And then, he saw him. Royce Maddox sat like a king on a broken throne. Thick beard, dark eyes, tattooed body. When he saw him, Jason felt something stir inside. It wasn't anger. It was something older, a memory that still bled. Royce recognized him. Cynical smile, the kind of expression that provokes. But Jason said nothing, just held his gaze. Firm, indestructible. Royce stood up slowly, as if he had been expecting that reunion for years. And maybe he had. The atmosphere felt ready to explode, but nothing happened. Jason simply turned his back and walked out. Because he hadn't come to fight at that moment. He came to look the enemy in the eye and recognize the truth. Royce wanted to provoke him, wanted him to lose control, wanted blood, but on his terms. Jason left the bar, but didn't go far. He stayed nearby, observing. He saw gang members coming and going. He saw deliveries being made by unmarked vans. He saw a pattern that was more than a hideout. It was a base of operations, and Jason intended to dismantle it piece by piece. In the following days, he gathered evidence, photographed plates, filmed suspicious deals, contacted an old ally, a police lieutenant who owed him a favor, all quietly, strategically, no noise. Meanwhile, Spike began to show signs of improvement, still weak but responding to treatment. The vet said he was strong. Jason simply nodded, but deep down, he knew. Spike was more than strong. He was loyal. He was living resistance. But time was running out. Jason knew Royce wouldn't wait, and he didn't want to wait either. It was time to strike back. That night, Jason returned to Steel Fang, but not through the front door. He used the basement, passed through forgotten corridors he knew from an old map, avoided the cameras, silent, invisible. He invaded the back room, found files, records of illegal bets, names of people who had been bribed, photos of underground fights, and then, among the papers, something unexpected. A dossier with his own name, Jason Statham, former agent, location, routine, data on Spike. It was personal. and it was planned. Royce had set everything up. Jason left with a new certainty. He wasn't just reacting, he was being hunted. But there was a fundamental difference between him and Royce. Royce used fear as a weapon. Jason used silence. And when Jason opened the bar door to confront the men behind it, he didn't expect to find a face from the past. Someone he thought was dead, but who was now there, sitting beside Royce, alive and smiling. Time seemed to slow down when Jason entered Steel Fang once more, this time with a firm pulse and controlled breathing. There was no rush in his steps, nor hesitation. It was as if he was walking into a storm he already knew. Only this time, he had come prepared. All eyes turned to him again, but there was something different in the air. The mocking smiles had vanished. The arrogance dissolved into an instinctive, almost animal fear. Even the boldest among the bikers realized there was a silent fury contained in that man, a fury that didn't need to be announced. Royce Maddox was in the same spot, as if he had been waiting for Jason's arrival. But beside him, there was a second man, someone Jason knew, and whom he never imagined seeing again. Caleb Wren, a former partner in special operations, presumed dead on a mission in southern Croatia years ago. At the time, a brutal ambush had decimated the unit. Jason saw him fall, buried the pain, mourned the loss, and carried on with one more scar that never healed. And now there he was, alive, intact, sitting with the enemy. Jason felt the impact of the reunion like a punch to the stomach, but he showed nothing. His face remained expressionless. Only the eyes said it all. Caleb looked at him too, with a mix of curiosity and shame. His gaze held no surprise, but guilt. It was as if he had expected that moment for a long time but didn't know how to face it. Now Jason understood. This was bigger than he thought. It wasn't just about Spike or revenge. It was a network, an organization, and Caleb was part of it. But why? There were no answers in that room, only more questions. Jason kept his composure. He knew the expected reaction was violence, but his plan was different. He once again left the bar without exchanging a single word, because it was the most dangerous move he could make, leave the enemies in suspense. Outside, the night grew colder. Jason's breath condensed in the air like smoke. His hands were cold, but his chest burned. Caleb's return stirred memories he preferred to keep buried. Failed missions, broken promises, deaths that never saw justice. Jason returned home, but sleep never came. He spent hours analyzing the information he had gathered. Gang records, bar photos, names involved. Everything pointed to a more complex plan than it appeared. At dawn, he received a call from the police lieutenant, the old favor he had called in days earlier. They had quietly investigated the Black Dagger riders, and what they found was disturbing. The gang was involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, merchant extortion, and illegal animal fights. Operations extended to other cities, and Caleb Wren appeared as one of the central coordinators of these branches. His name appeared in intelligence reports as deceased, but there were recent records tied to false identities. Caleb had been alive and working underground for years, off the radar. Jason ended the call with a tight chest. More than betrayal, it was an open wound. He had trusted Caleb, fought beside him, buried his memory as a lost brother. Now that brother was part of the threat that had nearly killed Spike. At the veterinary clinic, Spike was slowly improving. He could already stand with support. His eyes were brighter. His tail moved. Jason observed each step as if it were gold. He sat beside the stretcher for hours, gently petting the dog, like a man watching over a minefield. It was there that he decided the next step. It wasn't enough to confront Royce. It was Caleb who held the answers. He carried the key to the puzzle, and perhaps one last chance at redemption. Jason prepared a trap. He knew the gang monitored the area around the clinic, so he created a fake movement, left traces suggesting he was traveling to another city. In parallel, he placed hidden cameras around the clinic, requested discreet police protection, and attached a recorder to Spike's collar. The next night, the plan worked. 2 gang members broke into the clinic. One of them entered the recovery room. The other stayed at the door on lookout. Jason let them act for exactly 30 seconds, enough for their faces to be recorded. Then he emerged from the shadows, silent as a flash, lethal as a soldier. He took down the first with a sharp blow. The second tried to flee but was stopped by a precise punch to the stomach, followed by a quick hold. Jason didn't hurt them more than necessary. He wanted them to talk. And they did. Between empty threats and bravado, they revealed that the attack on Spike was part of a plan to get Jason's attention. It was a message. Caleb wanted to test his reaction before inviting him, or eliminating him. Royce was just the executor of the idea. The poison was a sign, a provocation. Jason listened to everything without blinking, then handed both men to the police with recorded evidence. He didn't want blood. He wanted justice. But now, he wanted answers from Caleb. The next day, he returned to Steel Fang. For the last time, he entered as always, firm, calm, alone. But this time, he wouldn't leave in silence. The bar felt more tense. Fewer people were there, and Caleb stood at the bar, alone. Royce wasn't around. Jason approached, stood, said nothing. Caleb slowly turned. The 2 locked eyes one last time. No more anger, only silent mourning. Caleb knew he had been defeated long before that night. The betrayal weighed on him like lead. Jason handed over a folder with documents, evidence, confessions. Everything Caleb had helped produce in the gang's backrooms. He wasn't just an accomplice. He was a co-author. Caleb didn't resist, just nodded with a resigned look. Jason turned around. The mission was over. Jason left without fighting. But the enemy made it clear. The next target wouldn't be the dog. It would be someone Jason couldn't afford to lose again. And now, time was against him, and the silent war had begun. Detroit woke up under heavy clouds, as if the city sensed something was about to happen. The wind dragged dust along the sidewalks, while distant horns created an irregular and restless background. In that gray atmosphere, Jason moved with the precision of someone who no longer had the right to make mistakes. Since the encounter with Caleb, his routine had changed. The days of silent observation were over. Now every minute was a piece on the warboard he was building. Because a war had been declared, and even though no one had heard the sound of the first shot, Jason had already felt the impact. Royce's threat was clear. He wouldn't stop at Spike. And Caleb had let it slip, even without saying a word, that something bigger was in motion. A second attack, a next target. Jason already knew who it would be. Lena. The only person with whom he still maintained ties outside the past. A former field assistant on a humanitarian mission, she had left clandestine service years ago, trying to rebuild her life as a nurse in a local clinic. Ever since Jason had saved her during an ambush in Bucharest, they kept in touch, and a mutual respect that never turned romantic, but surpassed ordinary friendship. She was the last fragile bond in a life of loss. And now, she was in danger. Jason went to the clinic where she worked. It was closed. The door forced open. Papers scattered. There were no signs of struggle, but also no sign of Lena. His heart raced, but his face remained neutral. His eyes analyzed the scene like a soldier in enemy territory. Every detail mattered. And there, among the torn documents on the floor, was a sheet with a note in red, an address, a name, an abandoned place in the industrial sector not far from the bar. Jason understood it was a trap. But he didn't hesitate. While the world remained distracted, Jason prepared. Returned home, reviewed old equipment, gathered what still worked, dressed in dark, discreet clothes. Everything calculated, everything silent. He didn't use weapons for revenge. He used them out of necessity. And now there was a mission to complete. But first, he stopped by the veterinary clinic. Spike was better. He walked with more strength, although still visibly affected. His eyes, however, were alive, and when they saw Jason enter, they shone with a mix of relief and alertness. Jason knelt beside the dog, ran his hand over the fur and whispered something no one heard. But Spike understood. The kind of mute conversation that only exists between beings connected by shared pain. Silently, Jason said goodbye. Because that night, he didn't know if he would return. The warehouse stood at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by twisted wires and broken fences. The rusted tin roof reflected the little moonlight. It was a place that breathed abandonment, but Jason sensed the ambush in the air. He entered from the side, avoiding the main access. Every step was calculated, every shadow examined. There were cameras, but he knew them, knew how to avoid them. Silence was his greatest weapon. Inside, Lena sat in a chair, hands tied, eyes wide. She wasn't hurt, yet. But the fear was evident. 3 men guarded the room. Jason identified them immediately, members of Royce's inner circle. He didn't act with rage. He acted with precision. One by one, the men were silently neutralized. Firm, quick, merciless blows. Jason left no margin for noise. When he freed Lena, she collapsed into his arms without strength. Her grateful look was enough. She knew he would come. Always knew. But the mission wasn't over. In the next room, Jason found something unexpected. Documents, boxes, computers. A real operations center. They were planning an expansion. Other cities. Other targets. There were names, addresses, photographs. Politicians, police officers, ordinary citizens. All marked. Jason copied everything. Photographed every page. Took enough evidence to destroy the gang, and those behind it. But something still bothered him. Royce wasn't there, nor Caleb. They knew Jason would come, and they had pulled back because they were preparing something bigger. Jason left Lena under protection. The police lieutenant was alerted. Forces were quietly mobilized. The operation would begin at dawn, but Jason wouldn't wait. He knew where he needed to be. In front of Steel Fang, he remained for hours. The city slept. The bar, however, was awake. Lights on, muffled voices. Jason watched everything. He knew Royce was there. And now, it was personal, because they messed with what he protected. Attacked where they knew he bled. And now they would see who he truly was. At midnight, he would return to the bar. But this time, he wouldn't come to talk. And what Royce had started for fun would end under the shadow of something he wouldn't be able to control. The wrath of a silent man, with everything to lose. Midnight. The clock seemed to tick slower. Time, once an enemy, now worked in Jason's favor. He walked toward Steel Fang like a judge heading to court. The city was silent, but inside him, everything screamed. There was no more room for contemplation. Only a mission to complete. The bar's facade looked the same, but something in the air had changed. The shadows felt denser, the whispers more calculated. They were waiting. But this time, so was Jason. He didn't carry weapons. He didn't need to. What he carried was more lethal than any pistol. Evidence, testimonies, truth, and a perfectly controlled fury. When he pushed open the bar's door, he was met with absolute silence. The regular patrons had disappeared. Only Royce's closest men were there, including him. Royce was seated in the center like a host in his iron empire. Behind him, Caleb watched, from a distance, like a specter from another life. The tension was thick, the kind of silence that precedes avalanches. Jason entered and stopped. He said nothing. Looked at Royce as one sees a wounded animal disguised as a predator. Royce, in turn, wore the same fake smile, the same contempt. But in that moment, something happened. The back doors were forced open. Police officers entered with firmness, armed, ready. The police lieutenant had done his part. Jason had orchestrated everything, every step, every name, every delivery. Royce tried to react, but it was too late. One of the men ran, another pulled a knife. Caleb stood still. Jason acted. He brought down the first before he could cross the hallway, dodged the second as if he saw the blow coming before it happened. In seconds, everything was under control. The gang neutralized. But the real confrontation was yet to come. Jason approached Caleb. Their eyes met one last time. There was no more anger, only silent grief. Caleb knew he had been defeated long before that night. The betrayal weighed on him like lead. Jason handed over a folder with documents. Evidence, confessions, everything Caleb had helped produce in the gang's back rooms. He wasn't just an accomplice, he was a co-author. Caleb didn't resist, just nodded with a resigned look. Jason turned away. The mission was over. The next morning, Detroit's streets felt different. The local news showed footage of the police operation, mass arrests, drug seizures, weapons, proof of illegal fights, extortion records, and one name in the spotlight. Royce Maddox, former military, now leader of the Black Dagger Riders, arrested for over 20 crimes. But one detail caught the attention of reporters, a fragment that didn't fit the headlines. The attack on a dog, apparently random, was what started the entire investigation. And in public comments, online forums, and social media, the message was clear. You never mess with a dog that belongs to a man like Jason Statham. At the veterinary clinic, Spike could already walk, still limping but with his head held high. The scar on his side was visible, but it didn't diminish his strength. On the contrary, it was now a symbol of survival. Jason picked him up calmly, signed the papers, thanked in silence, and walked him out the main door. People on the street recognized him, but no one approached. It was as if they instinctively knew that this wasn't a day for celebration. It was a day to begin again. Jason walked a few blocks until reaching a small park. He sat on a wooden bench. Spike lay beside him, eyes fixed on the horizon. The silence between them was pure. A pact. Jason took from his pocket a small chain. It was old. It had belonged to the daughter he had lost years ago. The last time he had held that object was the day he decided never to get attached to anything again. Until he found Spike. Now he tied the chain to the dog's collar, not as a charm, but as a legacy. As the day faded into golden tones, Jason received a call from the lieutenant. The investigation would expand to other cities. With the data he had provided, other gangs would be dismantled. Caleb would cooperate to reduce his sentence. Jason's name, however, would not be mentioned. As he had requested, discretion, justice, and silence. That night, Jason returned home. Spike lay on the rug as if he had belonged there forever. Jason poured fresh water and placed a new bowl of food, then sat on the couch, breathing deeply for the first time in days. The TV showed footage from the case, arrests, rescued dogs, citizens celebrating. But Jason turned it off. He didn't need to watch. He had lived it. Before sleeping, Jason sat on the floor beside Spike. He gently stroked the dog's head for several minutes. Then, as if whispering a vow to the universe, he looked at him and thought, "You saved me. I just returned the favor." The world might still be broken, but there, between man and dog, there was a piece of truth left intact. Some men fight for fame, others for money. But Jason fought for something much rarer, true loyalty. If this story has kept you hooked so far, imagine what the next one will bring. Leave a like if you believe the world needs more stories like this. Comment below what touched you most about this journey. Your opinion could inspire the next video. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next stories. Because here, every silence hides a past, and every past can change everything.